Hello, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, June 30th, 2020. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. It is good to have you back, man, if not socially distanced.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Definitely nice to be back. On today's show, we'll update you on the latest coronavirus numbers from the state of Michigan. And I'll catch you up on some important new vehicle reveals from the auto industry.
Plus, there's an update on the DOT parking structure in Ferndale, and a new list highlights the worst intersections in Michigan for traffic accidents.
That's all coming up right after we thank our members at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Your support matters, and it's greatly appreciated, especially now at a time when so much of our local news infrastructure is in doubt because of the coronavirus. Daily Detroit is independent media. We're fueled by our passion for this city and region, and we work hard to keep you up to speed on what you need to know around town. Your support makes a huge difference, and thank you.
So Sven, welcome back. How was the vacation? I hear you went to Ludington?
That's right, Ludington, Michigan, about halfway up the Lake Michigan coast on the west side of the state. Great vacation, really beautiful part of the state. I had been there before, and it was actually winter time. My wife and I visited the Ludington State Park in winter, and it was beautiful then, but holy crap, man, I got to give a shout out to the Ludington State Park, which honestly might be my favorite state park in the Lower Peninsula. I mean, it is absolutely just beautiful. It incorporates a lot of sand dunes, and so it's really hilly. And it also, in addition to having like miles of Lake Michigan beach frontage, has a lot of frontage on Hamlin Lake, which is an inland lake that flows into the Lake Michigan there. And it's just gorgeous. I mean, it's like beach and hemlock forests and everything, and a lot of really beautiful flora. I saw like wild iris blooming and things like that. So really gorgeous, just a nice relaxing time. I think I opened my laptop once all week, and so it was definitely nice to kind of unplug and everything. Great week, but I'm definitely kind of glad and relieved to be back as well.
So why are you relieved to be back? I mean, man, look, it's not exactly the most social of situations around here.
Well, that's true, and it's I will tell you that it's quite a bit hotter here. I mean, I don't know if the mercury ever cracked 70 last week, which sounds kind of cold, although it was actually perfect. The sun was nice and warm, and it was just actually perfect weather, I think. But I say that because especially as the week wore on and we started getting into the weekend, it was clear that a lot of people who are on vacation are not taking coronavirus seriously, right? Like I saw a lot of people breaking social distancing norms, not wearing masks. I mean, to give you an example, one night my family and I were in downtown Ludington looking for a place to eat. We saw a place across the street and figured we'd go over and, look at the menu and everything. And as I did that, I looked inside. They had kind of a open garage style door that was wide open to the bar area. And I looked in there. The bar was packed elbow to elbow with patrons, nobody wearing any masks. And so I thought, well, that takes care of that decision. I'm not going to eat there tonight for sure. Another night, I had to go up to town to place an order at a pizza place. None of the employees were wearing masks. There was a big beach house in the state park one day when we were at the beach where you have to, you use it for the bathrooms, and there's a little ice cream place in there. I mean, we were getting ice cream, and we were the only people getting ice cream, although at least the workers were behind, sort of like plexiglass shields and everything. But, frankly, it left me feeling a little bit uneasy. Like maybe we took too many risks overall over the week. I mean, I think it's easy to get kind of lulled into this false sense of security and like, oh, well, we've been doing this now for, 3 months almost, and we've stayed healthy. And so I'm almost kind of feeling like, okay, that's good. Hopefully I didn't get infected, but I'm going to take it easy and kind of stay back and not go out to any places in public for a while now. I just think that people think that because Governor Whitmer has relaxed the stay-at-home orders and opened up, various parts of the economy in various regions, for travel and going on vacation and everything, that everything's safe now and that the coronavirus no longer is a thing, which couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, coronavirus is still out there. We need to stay vigilant. And, unfortunately, everybody's worried instead about like, oh, it's not manly to wear a mask, or like, I'm not going to get into the politics of coronavirus. There's nothing political about wearing a mask. It's a public health thing. It's considerate for your fellow citizens and also for yourself. I mean, it's just really unfortunate. I think people around here in general, at least where I live, seem to be taking this whole thing a little bit more seriously than a lot of the people I saw when I was on vacation.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the virus and spread concerns, and frankly, your neighborhood, word just came in that the Dream Cruise, the official group putting it on, has canceled it for this year in the light of the concerns of the coronavirus. It's one of those things, Sven, I'm not sure you're going to stop people from cruising. They might have pulled the plug on the official events, and there was a lot of pressure from local cities to do that.
Right.
But I don't think you're going to get people to stop driving around. What is it like up there? I'm near Woodward, but
You're in Detroit.
I'm much farther south of the cruise zone. You're right at the end of the loop.
Right. The Woodward Dream Cruise is very much a suburban event, no question. And listen, I hear the roar of like big block engines on a more or less nightly basis, as long as it's not raining out. So yeah, cruising is still very much a thing. I mean, it was weeks ago. I mean, I think I told you, and I may have talked about it here on the show. I don't remember, but we were going up to my brother-in-law's house, straight up Woodward from here one Saturday night. This was like weeks ago. This was literally the first trip we had taken to somebody else's house since this whole lockdown began. And I mean, it was basically a cruise night on Woodward. It was crazy. And I told you that parking lot at Pasquale's in Royal Oak, which is the former Pasquale's, it's closed now and it's supposed to become a big boy. But that place was packed with, cars with the hoods up and people roaming around. I didn't see many of them wearing masks. It was a little alarming. So, I mean, I think, the Dream Cruise canceled officially. None of the cities are going to be giving out permits for vendors or for events or live music entertainment or anything like that, like they have in previous years. But let's be clear, there are still going to be people out cruising in their old vintage cars and everything. And I was talking with some of the Autoblog staffers online earlier about this, going back to what I was talking about how, masks have become politicized. I hate to say it, but I foresee the Dream Cruise being kind of ground zero for a lot of like people making political statements. You know what I mean? Like I could totally see people setting up T-shirt stands and being confronted by it because they don't have permits and it's not safe to do that, but doing it out of principle, like, you can't tell me I can't sell T-shirts here and this kind of thing. I unfortunately wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of that kind of stuff.
So let's get into what's now a ritual for us here at Daily Detroit. Coronavirus cases in Michigan. They're holding mostly steady with just 236 confirmed cases reported Monday and 4 deaths. Over the weekend, numbers have generally flattened out after a small uptick into the 300s. With cases raging in the South and West, Michigan is no longer a top 10 state in the nation for the number of cases, at nearly 63,500, along with more than 5,900 deaths. There have been some high-profile outbreaks, including one from a bar in East Lansing that spread locally to Grosse Pointe Park after someone who was at a bar in the capital came to a bonfire party in the east side suburb. That bar alone accounts for more than 80 cases. It's a reminder how fast this can spread without social distancing and masks. However, Michigan's overall virus spread level, or RT number, is down to 1.19. So for every case of COVID-19, there's 0.19 additional cases. So it is growing. It doesn't lead the nation in suppression or anything. That's Washington, D.C. and Connecticut and Massachusetts. But it is not spiking. Remember, with all this data, there's usually a couple of week lag between exposures, reported cases in the data, and then another lag until deaths show up. But so far, not as bad. Late Sunday, a Detroit Police Department SUV and the officer inside made national news by driving through a group of protesters in southwest Detroit, and it was caught on video from multiple angles. Although the ongoing protests have been generally peaceful in Detroit, there have been some flare-ups between police and demonstrators. 2 narratives of what happened over the weekend are emerging. Simplified, one is from the protesters' perspective that the DPD officer was trying to commit vehicular manslaughter. One of the group leaders, and there are nearly 30 involved with these protests, told the Freep that the officer should be held accountable and fired. 2, from the police perspective, a group of less than 30 protesters surrounded the vehicle, with some jumping on the hood, and at some point a skateboard was used to break the back window of the DPD vehicle, which caused the officer to fear more for their personal safety and try to leave the scene. The incident is being investigated by the department.
Unrelated, but also related, Governor Gretchen Whitmer is proposing reforms statewide around police practices. The top three are a ban on the use of chokeholds, limits to no-knock warrants, and lastly, filing a false police report could be considered a hate crime.
All right, we are shifting gears and using an overused cliche segue to the auto industry and Truck-A-Palooza. Sven, I understand there are some big reveals last week in the pickup truck segment.
That's right, Jer. And when you're talking about trucks, they don't get any bigger than Ford's F-150. Ford, of course, revealed the 2021 F-150 Thursday night. This is a huge truck for Ford. It's been 43 years as the best-selling truck in America when you count the F-Series. Casual truck observers, of which I, more or less consider myself to be one, will think that this is not a really revolutionary redesign. And I think that's true, but why mess with success here, I think, is sort of the onus that Ford is working from. This is the 14th generation of the F-150, and there are some exterior styling changes, mostly up front and in back, but the overall dimensions and shape and everything largely stay the same. There are going to be 6 different powertrain options here, not exactly the same as the 6 that are offered in the current model year Ford F-150. They're going to range from a small EcoBoost V6, that's a turbocharged V6, to a 5-liter V8. There's also a diesel Power Stroke option and a new one this year, which is going to be a hybrid powertrain. That's called Power Boost. I will mention also Ford is also developing a battery electric F-150, but that's still expected to be a couple of years away, and there's no news on that one yet. As for the 2021 F-150, there's going to be a range of new grille designs. There's Sync 4. That's the latest iteration of their infotainment system. There are new upgrades to the interior. And in the truck bed itself, they're going to have exterior lighting that you can operate either from the Sync infotainment touchscreen or from Ford's mobile app. And they've also got an in-bed power generator, so you can actually plug in like your power tools and stuff if you want to work on site, which is a feature that we're seeing in a lot of new pickup trucks nowadays. It's kind of neat. Also kind of neat in the bed, there's a flat tailgate option for workers, and it has indentations that do double duty. You can use them either to clamp down materials, like say you have like long 2x4s or something like that, or you can also use them to open bottles.
You mentioned the battery electric F-150. One of the things that's really interesting to me about electric vehicles is just the sheer torque that they have. If anyone hasn't driven an electric vehicle, it is definitely a different experience, and I could see how it would bring a lot to the table for something like a pickup truck if you could get enough range out of it to get through, the day.
For sure. It's been really interesting with electric vehicles. 10 years ago or so, when electric vehicles were still kind of more conceptual than they were reality, like all the focus was on fuel efficiency and sort of the green, environmental aspects of electric vehicles. Now the industry has really pivoted toward much more of their performance attributes, like the torque, like you mentioned, and packing them full of horsepower, because they can easily be modified to do that. And they're also getting away from using electric vehicles for cars like the Chevy Volt, right, which was one of the first big profile, technically it's a hybrid, but it was sort of considered an electric vehicle, range extended back in the day. But now they're using electric vehicle technologies in SUVs and big trucks and things like that.
So switching brands, but staying in the electric lane, there's a new truck revealed called the Lordstown Endurance. And I know what Lordstown is. It's the former GM plant in Lordstown, Ohio. Mm-hmm. But what's this with the brand and a whole new truck and this? What's going on?
So Lordstown Motors is the name of an electric vehicle startup. And as you mentioned, they took over the former GM plant that GM shuttered in Lordstown, Ohio. That plant became kind of a political football between the company. President Trump called them out for closing it, and as well the United Auto Workers Union, because this is a plant that employed, I think, 4,500 workers at its peak. And although Lordstown is pledging to hire a lot of those workers back, I don't think that they're going to get back to that, at least not anytime soon, to that level. So there's a lot of interest around this truck. Lordstown unveiled the Endurance last week with Vice President Mike Pence riding shotgun. The Republican Ohio governor was also in attendance. It's a fairly conventional looking pickup truck. I mean, this is not the Tesla Cybertruck or anything like that, which is really a revolutionary and polarizing design. This pickup truck is geared much more toward like work fleets, although regular customers can also buy them. It's going to have in-wheel motors, electric motors at each wheel, although they're not releasing specs yet, any of the performance specs. The company is aiming to start production and delivery by year's end, which seems awfully ambitious for a startup company that's, still in the process of retooling the plant and everything. But they seem intent to become the first U.S. company to release an all-electric pickup truck on the U.S. market, beating the likes of Tesla, which I mentioned, and also Rivian, the startup located in Plymouth.
Well, speaking of companies making electric pickup trucks, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, and you were on vacation, otherwise you probably would have done this story. But to add on to the big news last week about Rivian moving much of its Michigan operations to California, I know we spent some time on it, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I thought you captured it very well on the show. I think you did really well, and I loved your rant and shared it on my Twitter accounts. I will just add, you mentioned our visit to Rivian's engineering and design center out in Plymouth when we did that Detroit Public Television segment last year. I was struck by several things. I mean, I remember they were showing us their marketing, like visioning board. It was almost kind of like they were conceptualizing their brand. And I was really struck about how it kind of like looked like Patagonia. Like the whole vibe that I had there was like, this is like an outdoor brand that just happens to be making like a vehicle. I was surprised to see that from a company with such a sizable presence here in Detroit, although I was pleasantly surprised. I thought, this is great. Like, we need more of this kind of stuff. Like, this is exactly what I think Michigan needs more of. It would be a great talent attraction tool. People would love to come work for a company like this because we don't have much of that in this state. We're still clinging to our blue collar mechanical heritage, And Jerry, you and I also talked about it. I think that clearly Rivian's core customer is not necessarily a Michigan resident or like your typical truck buyer. I think Rivian, the product that you're going to see, like you're going to see Rivians all over the place in cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, the East Coast, things like that.
Seattle. Yeah, like when I thought about it as something that a camper would use. Like if you're more into camping and enjoying the outdoors as opposed to hauling things around, like I feel like the Rivian is a vehicle that just like calls to that lifestyle more.
Or, I mean, frankly, even if you're not like an outdoorsman, but you just a well-heeled guy who has a home in a cul-de-sac, frankly, in Malibu, that this is going to be your car, right? They're not making cars for like Macomb County residents, let's put it that way, who like to buy trucks, which is fine. It's not to say that people in Michigan won't buy their trucks. It's just that I think they're clearly aiming for different demographics. So in that way, I guess maybe it's not surprising. I will say, though, it is a little surprising to hear that they're pulling all these people out of Michigan because, and Autoline, who broke the story, kind of hinted at this, that a lot of the workers were mad because they helped Rivian get as far as they are. For a company that hasn't actually built anything, I mean, you still can't buy their cars. They have really impressed the industry overall. Like everybody has sat up and taken notice and said, these guys are onto something. They have beautifully designed products. And if their quality is up to what they say it is, like, watch out, like they're going to do well. And that was done largely with Michigan talent, which I think speaks well of our workforce here. So I will, include that plug. It's disappointing that they're leaving. I mean, we'll see how much they stay. I would totally also agree with your assertion, Jer, during your rant that Michigan needs to start focusing heavily on quality of life issues. I mean, what you were talking about with R.J. Scaringe, the CEO, about how he liked to bike from his apartments to work and everything, and just how hard that would be to their Plymouth Township location out there on Haggerty. It's not exactly a bike-friendly location. But I think those simple quality of life issues are hugely important and just something that we have never done a good job paying attention to here in Detroit.
Well, speaking of quality of life, let's talk about the worst intersections in Metro Detroit.
Exactly.
Right? Well, and you might remember the name Michigan Auto Law if you're a longtime listener of the show, because, Steve Gerson's been on the show.
Yep.
So have a couple of his colleagues from time to time. And each year they release an annual list of Michigan's most dangerous intersections. I guess if they release it each year, it is, of course, by default annual. Almost all of them are in Metro Detroit, and all of the ones in Metro Detroit, well, they're in the suburbs. We're not going to link to every single one because there's a lot. I think there's like 17 or 20 or something like that. But I thought we'd pick out a few and note some of the lowlights, if you will. And I wanted to start out by calling out the top of the list, which is 18.5 mile at Van Dyke in Sterling Heights, which has had 229 crashes and 14 injuries. They're saying that it's the most dangerous in Michigan. And I'll tell you, that one's a special kind of hell, as it's a roundabout, and roundabouts are usually good ideas in my mind, but Michiganders just don't get them. And then there's another kind of like other road that gets like kind of added in because you've got Van Dyke, new Van Dyke that kind of turns into a freeway.
Ugh.
And then you've got 18.5 mile. It's like a weird tri-intersection merged into a roundabout. It's just a planning disaster. And if you're not used to it, like it can be super harrowing. And in general, Michiganders don't really understand roundabouts very well. Like it's just not something we do. And so whenever we run into them, you're always going to get a higher chance of those folks who just freeze up and they just don't know what to do. And you just need to keep driving.
Yeah, I would also point out a couple other intersections that make the list that are also now roundabouts. I mean, I think they've probably always been dangerous, and that's typically why traffic engineers add roundabouts, because they're safer and they tend to move traffic more quickly than conventional intersections. Orchard Lake at 14 Mile in Farmington Hills, which had 178 crashes and 22 injuries. That's kind of a mess out there. I feel like Farmington Hills, frankly, could get a lot of spots on this list. Maybe not for the most dangerous, but for the most messed up traffic designs. That whole kind of 275, M5, 696, 96 nexus there is, don't even get me started on it. Another one, this is out in Pittsfield Township, just south of Ann Arbor, State Street at West Ellsworth. I know that that's a new roundabout there as well. And then another, I'm almost positive this is a roundabout, but it's been a while since I've been out there. So if I'm wrong, tell me at dailydetroit@gmail.com. But M5 at Pontiac Trail out in Commerce Township, that place had 161 crashes and 12 injuries. I would also point out one other that made the list. This is not a roundabout, but Telegraph and Square Lake in Bloomfield Township. I used to frequent that intersection a long time ago, back when I used to work out in Pontiac and spent my days, driving around Oakland County as a reporter for the Oakland Press. I mean, Telegraph is basically a freeway as it is, and there are just far, far too many cars out in that neck of the woods. Everything is car dependent. Nothing is walkable. My financial advisor used to have his office on one of the corners there at Square Lake and Telegraph. And I remember one time I went out there and I missed his office, and trying to get back to that corner and, make the turns and the Michigan lefts. I mean, it literally took me like 10 or 15 minutes just to get back to that corner. It was just a mess.
Well, to round this out, one I'll add in that is a little bit closer to home is 11 Mile and I-696 at Van Dyke. So it's that kind of area where you've got 11 Mile kind of shadowing 696, and then you got Van Dyke going right through it. It has 129 crashes and 31 injuries. And that thing, it's old school, but people do crazy things because there's very few places you can turn. And so there's a lot of folks having driven this, and I don't know the stats with it, but my personal experience is people making turns when they're not supposed to, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's very hard to navigate if you're trying to get to something that's to the left or the right. It's really designed to just kind of go through. And so it's just a mess.
There's an update about the big mixed-use parking structure in downtown Ferndale. C&G News is back to publishing print editions, which is a rare bit of good news in the news industry these days. And in the Woodward Talk, they ran a story about the Dot, as Ferndale's new parking structure is called. It saw construction paused in mid-March for nearly 2 months, and as anyone who's been by it recently can attest, that means the project will miss its original June deadline for completion. Governor Whitmer reopened construction projects on May 1st, but work has been slow to fully resume at the site because many workers were slow to return to work out of concern for their health and because of disruptions to the supply chain during the pandemic. City officials say they're still waiting on an official new completion date, but they're hoping for September or October. Meanwhile, the city says reconstruction on streetscaping on West Troy Street in front of the structure was set to kick off on Monday. That includes removing the sidewalk directly behind the 9 Mile Road businesses. That work is also expected to last around 4 weeks. It will result in the elimination of all the curbs, installation of planters, benches, and trees, and a new paver system. As we've talked about on the show before, the DOT will combine ground floor retail space with around 400 parking spaces and roughly 20,000 square feet of top floor office space.
And that'll do it for your Daily Detroit. Thanks so much for listening. If someone needs to know about the show, well, tell them. It's the best way to share what to know and where to go in Metro Detroit, even though some of us are going a few less places than we used to. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. Take care of each other, and we'll get through this together.